You first, sweetheart. Master Sergeant Kane Mercer's voice cut through the combat pit like a blade. 48 Marines laughed. The small woman in front of them stood 5'4", 128 pounds. A supply clerk, a joke. What none of them knew 14 months ago in a blood-soaked safe house outside Mosul, she killed 4 men with her bare hands in under 90 seconds. No weapon, no backup, just rage and training that officially doesn't exist. Mercer pointed at 8 of his best fighters. Teach her what real Marines are made of. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stepped into the sand. She smiled, and one of them took a step back before she even moved. If this story grips you the way it gripped me, hit subscribe and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The sand pit at Camp Lejeune had witnessed blood every week for 40 years. Marines called it the grinder. 20 feet by 40 feet of packed sand where reputations were built and egos were buried. The morning sun pressed down without mercy, and the air carried the smell of sweat and iron that never quite washed away. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at the edge of that pit with her boots planted on concrete, already hot enough to burn through the soles. 28 years old. Lean frame built from functional work, not vanity training. The kind of body people consistently underestimated. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her face held the stillness that most people mistook for timidity. Her eyes told a different story if anyone bothered to look. Dark brown, almost black in direct light, and they moved constantly. Not with nervousness, with calculation. She tracked every Marine in her peripheral vision, measured distances between bodies, noted footing and spacing without conscious thought. It was a habit built in places where looking at the wrong person too long meant dying. Master Sergeant Kane Mercer watched her from across the pit with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. 41 years old, 6'3", 230 pounds of functional muscle earned through decades of infantry work and martial arts instruction. He held a 5th-degree black belt in the Marine Corps Martial Arts program and ran this advanced instructor course with authority forged in places where techniques meant survival or death. Mercer did not hate women in the Corps. He hated tourists, people who showed up to collect a qualification and left without understanding what any of it actually meant. He had watched Marines get hurt because someone in their unit carried a belt they never truly earned. When he looked at Maya Chen, he saw a logistics clerk who had probably never thrown a real punch outside controlled drills. Her records showed a deployment to Kuwait that almost certainly meant sitting inside the wire. Her current MC MAP qualification was a green belt earned 3 years prior. Green belt. Middle of the system. Enough to show competence, not enough to impress anyone here. He had already decided she would wash out before the week ended. What Mercer did not know was that Maya's actual service history was locked behind access restrictions requiring a 2-star general's authorization and a formal briefing from MARSOC headquarters. The last person cleared to read that file had died in an ambush in Syria 14 months ago. Staff Sergeant Cole Brighton approached Maya outside the equipment room that afternoon. 33 years old, reconnaissance Marine with a shaved head and a 3rd-degree black belt. Mercer's hand-picked assistant instructor. He positioned himself close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "You're the supply clerk from Pendleton, right?" Maya nodded once. Brighton's smile carried no warmth. "Word is you've got a green belt and somehow convinced someone you belonged here. Must have been very persuasive." The implication was clear. She gave him nothing. "My paperwork is complete, same as everyone else." He stepped closer. "This isn't about paperwork. This is where people get hurt for real. When you wash out, and you will remember that some of us tried to warn you." He walked away before she could respond. The second day began with a 6-mile formation run, followed by calisthenics, followed by introduction to the training pit. Maya finished the run in the middle of the pack. She was measuring herself against the others without revealing anything. The pit session was where things escalated. Mercer paired candidates for basic grappling drills. Maya drew a corporal named Decker, stocky infantry marine who outweighed her by 70 pounds. The exercise was simple. Controlled takedowns and escapes. Tap to submit. Decker did not control his intensity. His first takedown slammed Maya's shoulder into the sand hard enough to leave a bruise that would last 2 weeks. His submission attempt applied pressure to her throat beyond what the drill required. Maya tapped. Decker held the choke 3 extra seconds before releasing. "Learn to tap faster," he said loud enough for witnesses. "Nobody out there is going to wait for you to decide you've had enough." Maya stood, brushed sand from her shorts, let her face show nothing. But her eyes tracked Decker as he walked away, cataloging how he moved, where he balanced his weight, which angles would expose his weaknesses. That night, Maya sat on the edge of her rack in the small barracks room. 8 feet by 10 feet. Standard transient quarters. The only light came from parking lot lamps bleeding through the blinds. Her ribs ached from Decker. Her shoulder throbbed from the takedown. Her throat still felt the ghost of a choke held too long. None of it mattered. Pain was an old companion. From beneath her pillow, she retrieved a worn leather case. Inside was a photograph creased and softened from years of handling. 2 people standing in front of a mud brick wall. Maya in civilian clothes, face thinner than it was now. Beside her, a man in his late 40s with a graying beard and the weathered features of someone who had spent too many years in hard places. Gunnery Sergeant Victor Reyes, her mentor. The only person who had ever truly understood what she was becoming. She traced the edge of his face with her thumb. 14 months since the ambush. 14 months since a flag-draped coffin and a hole in her life that nothing would ever fill. "You told me to stay invisible," she whispered to the photograph. "You told me proving myself would only create problems." But invisibility was killing her slowly. The silence of classified work. The weight of missions no one would ever acknowledge. Skills that could never be discussed. She put the photograph away. Tomorrow would bring more pressure. More tests. More men who believed she did not belong. Let them believe it. Maya Chen learned to fight before anyone told her that fighting was not something women were supposed to do. She grew up in East Oakland, in a neighborhood where summer heat cracked asphalt and poverty cracked families. Her father, James Chen, had served as a Marine Scout sniper. 3 tours across 2 wars before shrapnel from a roadside bomb took his left eye and ended his career. He came home with a glass eye, a purple heart, and an understanding of violence that most people only read about in books. Her mother left when Maya was 7. After that, it was just the 2 of them in a small apartment that smelled like gun oil and discipline. James was hard, but not cruel. He believed the world was brutal, and survival required being more brutal in return. He taught Maya to throw a proper punch when she was 9. By 12, she could execute a blood choke that would put a grown man to sleep. By 15, she had broken a boy's arm in the parking lot behind her high school after he tried to drag her into his car. The police called it self-defense. Her father called it a lesson learned. "The world doesn't care that you're small," he told her afterward, while she iced her knuckles at the kitchen table. "The world doesn't care that you're a girl. The only thing that matters is whether you're willing to do what needs to be done when the moment comes." Maya was always willing. James died of a heart attack when she was 17. No warning. No last words. Just a man who had survived 2 wars dead on the kitchen floor before the ambulance could arrive. She enlisted the week after her 18th birthday, partly to escape Oakland, and partly because the Corps was the only path forward that made sense. Boot camp at Paris Island was hard, but Maya had been hard her whole life. She graduated in the top tier of her platoon and requested infantry, despite knowing the combat billets were not yet fully open to women. They assigned her to logistics instead. 6 years of loading trucks and managing supply chains, while the fire inside her burned with nowhere to go. Then, in 2021, a MARSOC recruiter found her combatives' scores and made a phone call. The Marine Special Operations Command had been running the cultural support program for years. Women attached to special operations teams for missions requiring female presence. But there was a newer initiative. Smaller. Less official. It needed women capable of more than building rapport with village elders. They needed operators who could enter spaces men could not and handle themselves when those spaces turned violent. Maya volunteered. For 2 years, she trained at facilities that appeared on no public maps. She learned Krav Maga from Israeli instructors who had killed more men than they could remember. She learned Sistema from a former Russian Special Forces soldier who had defected during the Chechen Wars. She learned Filipino blade work from a retired Force Recon gunnery sergeant whose forearms carried more scars than unmarked skin. She learned how to stop a threat with her hands in ways that left no evidence, and she learned how to control without killing, which was often harder. Gunnery Sergeant Victor Reyes oversaw her training from the beginning. 51 years old. 3 decades in special operations. The kind of man who spoke softly because he had nothing left to prove. He saw something in Maya that others missed. "You've got the skills," he told her one night after a training session that left her exhausted and bleeding from a split lip. "But skills aren't enough. Any fool can learn techniques. What makes an operator is what happens in here." He tapped his temple. "And in here?" He tapped his chest. "What do you mean?" Reyes sat down across from her. "The hardest part of this work is the silence. Missions no one will ever acknowledge. Skills you can never discuss. Secrets you'll carry to your grave. You're going to want to prove yourself. You're going to want to show them everything you can do. And I shouldn't. The moment you fight for ego or revenge or anything except the mission, you become dangerous. Not to the enemy, to everyone including yourself." Maya remembered those words now sitting in her barracks room at Camp Lejeune. She remembered them every time Decker slammed her too hard during drills, every time Brighton made comments designed to break her confidence, every time the other candidates treated her like she was invisible. Her first operational deployment came in northern Iraq in 2022. Intelligence had identified a compound where high-value targets were meeting with a local weapons smuggling network. The compound contained a women's section that male operators could not enter without triggering immediate armed response. Maya went in alone. Local clothing, a concealed blade, her training. 4 men tried to stop her from reaching the objective. None of them succeeded. She did not remember the details clearly. That was how it worked when training took over. The conscious mind stepped aside, and the body executed techniques that had been drilled 10,000 times. She remembered the wet sound of a joint giving way under torque. She remembered the silence afterward. She remembered the high-value target's face when he realized the small woman in traditional dress had just eliminated his security with her bare hands. The official after-action report credited the mission's success to signals intelligence and a coordinated strike element. Maya's name appeared nowhere in any document. Her actions were classified under a compartment that fewer than 50 people in the Department of Defense could access. She received no award, no recognition. Just a handshake from a colonel who looked at her like she was something he had never encountered before. "You did good work in there," the colonel said. "Reyes was right about you." "Thank you, sir. There will be more missions, harder ones. Can you handle that?" Maya met his eyes. "I can handle anything, sir." She believed it at the time. 6 months later, Reyes was dead. Improvised explosive device in Syria. No dramatic last words, just a flag-draped coffin and a hole in Maya's world that nothing would ever fill. After his death, she requested transfer back to conventional forces. She wanted to disappear, to be ordinary, to stop carrying the weight of missions that no one would ever acknowledge. The Corps sent her to Camp Pendleton. A year of pushing papers, a year of pretending to be something she was not. But ordinary never fit. The fire her father had lit inside her still burned. The advanced instructor course was her way back. A chance to teach what she knew without explaining where she had learned it. A chance to formalize skills she could finally acknowledge. She just had to survive the men who believed she did not belong. Over the next 3 days, the pressure intensified. Never overt enough to trigger formal investigation. Just constant friction from multiple directions. Brighton critiqued her form during technique sessions with corrections that were technically accurate, but delivered to suggest she was hopeless. "Your stance is too wide. You're telegraphing your movements. A blind man could see that takedown coming." "Understood, Staff Sergeant." "Is that all you've got to say?" Maya kept her voice level. "I'm here to learn, Staff Sergeant." Brighton stepped closer. "You're here because someone made a mistake. This course has standards, real standards, and you don't meet them." Decker made contact during striking drills hard enough to bruise her ribs and crack something in her sternum that hurt when she breathed. "Sorry," he said each time with a smile that suggested he was not sorry at all. Other candidates stopped inviting her to eat with them, stopped including her in conversation, stopped treating her like she belonged. Mercer observed all of it. He intervened on none of it. He believed he was letting the system work. If she could not handle peer pressure, she could not handle the responsibility of training Marines who might depend on these skills in combat. What he failed to understand was that Maya had endured pressure that would have broken most of the men in this course. She had operated alone in hostile territory with no weapon and no extraction plan. She had felt a man's trachea collapse under her palm while his companions pounded on the door 3 feet away. She had walked through a village marketplace 30 minutes after killing a man buying vegetables from a vendor who would never know what she had done. This was not pressure. This was noise. On the 4th evening, Brighton organized an unofficial sparring session in the pit. "Off the record," he called it. A chance for candidates to test themselves without instructors watching too carefully. He invited everyone except Maya. She showed up anyway. Brighton smiled when he saw her at the edge of the sand. "You sure about this?" "These sessions get rough." Maya stepped into the pit without answering. The smile left his face. That night, she sat on her rack and thought about what would happen tomorrow. She could win. She knew that with absolute certainty. These men were good, but they had never faced someone like her. They had never trained with instructors who had learned their craft in real combat, against real enemies, with real consequences for failure. But Reyes's voice echoed in her mind. "The moment you fight for ego or revenge." Was that what this was, ego revenge? She thought about Decker's hands around her throat. Brighton's condescending smile, the way Mercer watched without intervening, measuring her weakness instead of her strength. No, this was not about revenge. This was about something else entirely. These men needed to learn a lesson. Not that women could fight, not that Maya was exceptional, but that the assumptions they carried, the certainties they clung to, could get them killed in environments where reality did not care about expectations. If embarrassing them taught that lesson, so be it. She lay back on her rack, and let her breathing slow. Tomorrow, she would show them what silence sounded like when it finally chose to speak. The 5th day arrived with clouds building in the west and humidity thick enough to taste. Maya went through morning drills without incident. She ran the formation run without pushing to the front. She executed techniques during practice sessions with enough competence to avoid criticism, but not enough to draw attention. She was saving her energy. At 19:30 hours, the unofficial sparring session began. Portable floodlights turned the sand into a pale arena. 48 Marines formed a rough circle around the pit. Word had traveled. Even candidates who had not planned to participate had come to watch. The air carried the energy that preceded violence, the barely contained anticipation of trained fighters given permission to test themselves. Brighton stood at the pit's edge, black belt wrapped around his waist. Rules are simple: controlled contact, tap to submit, no strikes to throat, groin, or spine. Everything else is fair. He paused, eyes finding Maya. Questions? She shook her head. The first bout matched 2 infantry sergeants who had been trading insults all week. It lasted 30 seconds before one tapped to an arm bar. The second bout went longer, ending with a rear naked choke. Then Brighton pointed at Maya. New girl, you're up. She stepped onto the sand without hesitation, cool against her bare feet, packed firm enough for solid footing. Her first opponent was Decker, the corporal who had choked her too long during drills. 70 pounds heavier, the confident stance of someone who had never lost to anyone smaller. This should be quick, someone said from the circle. Decker shot forward, driving for a double-leg takedown with the aggression that worked against opponents who panicked. Maya did not panic. She sprawled, dropping her hips and driving weight onto his shoulders. As he tried to adjust, she snaked her arm around his neck. The guillotine choke locked before he understood what was happening. She squeezed, compressing the arteries on both sides of his neck. He struggled for 4 seconds. Then his palm slapped sand. She released immediately, stepped back. Silence. Decker rose with his face flushed from the choke and from something else. The humiliation of losing in front of everyone to the woman he had mocked for days. Next, Brighton said. His voice was tight. The second opponent was a sergeant named Patterson, taller than Decker, faster. He did not rush. He circled, probing with feints, testing her reactions. Maya waited. Patterson threw a jab to measure distance. Maya slipped it, head moving just enough to let his fist pass her cheek, and answered with a low kick to his lead thigh that buckled his knee. Before he recovered, she closed distance, secured an underhook, and executed a hip throw that put him flat on his back. Mount came naturally, knees pinning his biceps. She dropped an elbow toward his face and stopped an inch from his nose. Controlled contact. He tapped. 12 seconds. Murmurs now. Confusion mixing with something that might have been respect. Brighton's expression had gone rigid. He pointed at 2 more candidates. Both of you. Together. 2-on-1. Maya nodded. The next pair were infantry Marines, both tan belts, both confident that numbers would decide it. They entered from opposite sides, trying to flank her. Maya moved before they could coordinate. She closed on the one to her right, driving a palm strike into his solar plexus that folded him forward, then pivoted to catch the second one's incoming hook on her forearm and redirect his momentum into a knee strike to his thigh that dead-legged him instantly. The first tried to grab her from behind. She dropped her base, hooked his ankle, and swept him onto his back. Transition to side control. Kimura. Hyperextended his shoulder until he tapped. The second was still trying to stand when she reached him. Arm drag to off balance. Sweep to put him down. Mount. Americana that torqued his elbow until his hand hit sand. 18 seconds. Both finished. 4 down. Brighton was no longer smiling. His face had gone pale under the floodlights. "4 more," someone called from the crowd. "Send 4." It was not mockery. It was a challenge. And in this world, challenges required answers. Brighton looked at the remaining candidates. Then he stepped into the pit himself, followed by 3 others. 4 men. All black belts. All with years of training. Against 1 woman with a green belt and records that showed nothing worth respecting. Mercer pushed through the circle just as they squared off. His face revealed nothing, but he did not stop what was happening. The 4 spread out, trying to encircle her. They had learned from watching. No more sequential attacks. No more arrogance. Maya breathed. The world slowed. She moved. The first caught an elbow to the jaw that snapped his head sideways and dropped him to 1 knee. The second received a front kick to the sternum that folded him, followed by a knee to the forehead as he doubled over. The third managed to grip her wrist, but she rolled with it, using his momentum to throw him over her hip and into the sand. Brighton was last. He was the best of them, and he knew it. He shot in low. Perfect level change. Textbook double leg. Maya sprawled, but did not go for the guillotine. Instead, she transitioned to his back as his drive carried him forward, sinking her hooks around his hips and threading her arm across his throat. The rear naked choke was textbook. Forearm against the carotid arteries. Other hand securing the grip behind his head. Legs controlling his torso so he could not turn or roll free. Brighton fought. He gripped her arm, tried to tuck his chin, attempted to bridge and escape. Nothing worked. 8 seconds later, his palm hit the sand. She held the choke exactly 1 second longer. Not enough to injure, just enough to make a point. Then she released and stood. 8 Marines. 45 seconds. Complete silence. Mercer stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Maya with something that bordered on disbelief. "Who the hell are you?" Maya wiped sand from her palms. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, Greenbelt, Supply." She did not smile. She did not need to. The silence stretched across the pit like a held breath. 48 Marines stood frozen, staring at the woman who had just dismantled 8 of their own with efficiency. Most of them had only seen in training films. The floodlights hummed. The air smelled of sweat and sand, and something else, the sharp scent of assumptions shattering. Mercer stepped onto the sand. His boots left impressions next to the marks left by bodies Maya had put there. That was not Greenbelt technique. His voice was controlled but edged with something dangerous. Those transitions, that timing, that is not something taught in any standard course. Maya met his stare without flinching. "Where did you actually train?" "The training I received does not appear in my service record." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm authorized to provide." Mercer's jaw tightened. He was not accustomed to being stonewalled by staff sergeants. He was not accustomed to watching his best fighters get dismantled in under a minute by someone half their size. Brighton had managed to stand. Sand still clung to his PT gear. He stared at Maya with an expression that blended disbelief with something approaching fear. The man who had spent 4 days trying to break her confidence now looked like he was questioning everything he thought he knew. "This is impossible," he said. "Nobody moves like that without years of specialized training. Nobody." Maya turned to face him. "You assumed I had nothing because my records showed nothing. That assumption almost got you choked unconscious." Brighton's face reddened. "I want to know who you really are." "You're not cleared to know." "Bullshit. Staff Sergeant Brighton." Mercer's voice cut through like a blade. "Stand down." Brighton's hands clenched into fists, but he stepped back. Mercer turned his attention back to Maya. His eyes had changed. The dismissal was gone, replaced by something harder to read. Calculation, maybe. Or reassessment. "You've been here 4 days," he said. 4 days of letting Decker rough you up in drills. 4 days of taking criticism from Brighton without response. 4 days of playing the role of the overwhelmed logistics clerk. "Yes." "Why?" Maya considered the question. She thought about Reyes, about the photograph in her barracks room, about everything he had taught her regarding silence and ego and the dangers of fighting for the wrong reasons. "Because proving myself was never the mission." Then what was surviving long enough to earn a qualification I can actually acknowledge? Mercer studied her for a long moment. The crowd around the pit had gone completely quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. They were all waiting to see what would happen next. "Your records are classified," Mercer said finally. "Classified enough that someone with my clearance can't access them." "Yes. Which means you served in a compartmented program. Something black. Something that doesn't officially exist." Maya said nothing. Mercer nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "I've seen operators from those programs before. Twice in my career. They moved like you move, fought like you fight, had the same look in their eyes." He paused. "What happened? Why are you here, instead of wherever you were?" The question hit Maya harder than any of Decker's strikes. She felt something shift in her chest. A door she had kept locked for 14 months. "My mentor was killed," she said quietly. "The program was restructured after his death. I requested transfer to conventional forces." "You wanted to disappear." "I wanted to stop carrying the weight of missions no one would ever know about." Mercer was silent for several seconds. Around them, 48 Marines continued to watch, continued to listen, continued to process what they were witnessing. "The weight doesn't go away," Mercer said finally. "I've been doing this for 23 years. The weight never goes away. You just learn to carry it differently." Maya met his eyes. For the first time since arriving at this course, she saw something other than judgment or suspicion. She saw recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement of one warrior by another. Then the moment broke. From beyond the crowd, a voice cut through the silence. "Gunnery Sergeant Mercer." Everyone turned. A Marine in service. Charlie's approached from the administrative building. Her stride was unhurried but purposeful. Silver eagles gleamed on her collar. Colonel Diana Vance, commanding officer of the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion. 55 years old, with the presence that made junior Marines straighten instinctively. Mercer snapped to attention. "Ma'am." Vance stopped at the pit's edge. Her eyes moved across the scene. 8 Marines in various states of recovery. Sand disturbed by impacts. Maya Chen standing at the center with her breathing barely elevated. "I received a call from Quantico 30 minutes ago," Vance said. "From someone whose name will not be spoken in this setting. I was informed that one of my course candidates has a background I was not previously aware of." She looked at Maya. "Staff Sergeant Chen, do you understand why I'm here?" Maya's expression did not change. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I do." Vance addressed Mercer. "Gunnery Sergeant, Staff Sergeant Chen spent 2 years attached to Marine Special Operations Command under the Cultural Support Program's Advanced Element. Her training includes close-quarters combat instruction from sources I am not cleared to specify. Her operational history includes deployments that do not officially exist to locations where we were never officially present." Mercer's face went blank. The expression of someone receiving information that fit no existing category in his mind. "The reason her record reflects only a green belt," Vance continued, is because the training she actually received was never entered into any official system. What she demonstrated tonight represents baseline capability for the program she served in. Brighton had gone pale. He stared at Maya like she was something from another world, something that should not exist. If she already has this level of skill, Mercer said slowly, why does she need this course? Vance's tone softened slightly. Because the program no longer exists in its previous form. The gunnery sergeant who recruited and mentored her was killed in action 14 months ago. She requested return to conventional service, and that transition requires formalizing qualifications she can actually acknowledge. She faced Maya directly. Staff Sergeant, I understand your preference was to complete this course without drawing attention. That option no longer appears available. Maya's shoulders dropped slightly, the first visible sign of anything other than complete control. No, ma'am, it does not. Vance turned back to Mercer. Gunnery Sergeant, I'm recommending that Staff Sergeant Chen receive immediate certification at the black belt level based on demonstrated proficiency. I'm also recommending her assignment as assistant instructor for the duration of this course under your supervision. She paused. I trust there will be no objection. Mercer was silent for a long moment. His gaze moved from Maya to the men she had defeated to the candidates still processing what they had witnessed. Then he did something no one expected. He bowed. Not deep, not formal. Just a slight inclination of his head. The acknowledgement that warriors offered other warriors when words were inadequate. No objection, ma'am. Something shifted in Maya's chest. Not triumph, not vindication. Something quieter and harder to name. For 2 years, she had carried her abilities in secret, hidden behind a green belt and logistics designation that told the world nothing true about her. She had convinced herself that anonymity was what she wanted, that vanishing was easier than explaining. Standing in that pit surrounded by men who were finally seeing her, she understood what Reyes had meant. The silence had been killing her slowly, and maybe it was time to let it go. Colonel Vance departed after a brief private conversation with Mercer. The crowd began to disperse. Marines walked away in small groups, their voices low, still processing what they had seen. Maya remained at the pit's edge. Decker approached her first. She watched him come, unsure what to expect. Anger, maybe. Humiliation transformed into aggression. She had seen it before. But Decker stopped 3 feet away, and his expression held none of the hostility she anticipated. I owe you an apology, he said. Maya waited. The way I treated you during drills, the chokes I held too long, the hits that were harder than they needed to be. He swallowed. I was testing you, trying to make you quit. I know. I thought you were a tourist, someone who had no business being here, someone who would get real Marines hurt because she couldn't handle what this course demands. And now, Decker exhaled slowly. Now I understand that I was the one who couldn't handle what I was seeing. You took everything I gave you without complaint, without breaking, without fighting back when you could have put me on the ground any time you wanted. He met her eyes. Why didn't you? After what I did, why didn't you make me pay for it? Maya considered the question. She thought about Reyes again, about the lessons he had drilled into her, about the difference between capability and character. Because embarrassing you in front of everyone would have felt good for about 5 seconds, she said, and then it would have made everything harder, for both of us. Decker nodded slowly. My drill instructor told me something during boot camp. He said the measure of a Marine isn't what they do when everyone's watching. It's what they do when no one is. Smart, man. I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. Decker extended his hand. I won't forget it again. Maya took his hand and shook it. We're good, Corporal. Decker walked away, and Brighton took his place. The staff sergeant looked different than he had an hour ago. The arrogance was gone. The condescension had vanished. What remained was something rawer, more honest. "I need to say something," Brighton started. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He cut her off firmly. "What I said when you arrived, how I treated you those first days, it was wrong. All of it." Maya studied him. "Why did you do it?" Brighton was quiet for a moment. "Fear. Not of you specifically. Fear that standards were eroding. Fear that the Corps was advancing people who would get Marines killed because someone needed to meet a demographic target. You thought I was a diversity checkbox. I thought you were a symbol of everything wrong with the modern military, someone who looked good on paper but would fold the moment things got real." He laughed bitterly. "And now I understand that I almost dismissed the best fighter this course has ever seen because I was too focused on what you appeared to be instead of what you actually were." Brighton met her eyes directly. "I've been an instructor here for 3 years. I've trained hundreds of Marines. I've never seen anyone move the way you moved tonight. Not the candidates, not the other instructors, not even Mercer. Mercer's good. Mercer's exceptional, but you're something else entirely." Brighton paused. "The program you came from, the training you received, it created something I don't have a name for." Maya thought about Reyes, about the Israeli Krav Maga instructors who had pushed her beyond every limit she thought she had, about the Russian Sistema specialist who had taught her to turn an opponent's strength into their destruction, about the Filipino blade master whose forearms carried more scars than unmarked skin. "It created what they needed it to create," she said quietly. "Someone who could go places others couldn't, do things others wouldn't, come back when others didn't. And now I'm trying to figure out what comes next." Brighton nodded. "For what it's worth, I hope you stay. This course needs someone like you. These Marines need to learn what you can teach them." He extended his hand. Maya took it. "I won't make that mistake again," Brighton said. "Judging someone by what they appear to be instead of what they actually are." He walked away, leaving Maya alone at the pit's edge. She stood there for a long time, watching the sand settle where bodies had fallen. The floodlights hummed overhead. The California night had turned cool, and the sweat on her skin felt cold. Something had changed tonight. Something fundamental. For 2 years she had carried her abilities like a secret shame, hidden them behind fake records and false humility, convinced herself that invisibility was safety, but invisibility was just another kind of prison. Reyes had tried to tell her, "The silence will kill you slowly. Find something that keeps you human." She had thought he meant a person, a relationship, something external to anchor herself. Maybe what he meant was purpose. The next morning, Maya reported to Mercer's office at 0600. He was already at his desk, a cup of coffee in his hand and a stack of folders in front of him. He gestured for her to sit. "I spent most of last night making phone calls," he said without preamble, "trying to learn more about the program you came from. And I hit walls everywhere I turned, classification levels I've never encountered, access restrictions that require authorization from people whose names I've never heard." He set down his coffee. "Whatever you were part of, it's buried deep." Maya said nothing. "I also spoke with Colonel Vance again this morning. She's confirmed your new assignment. Assistant instructor effective immediately. You'll work directly under my supervision." "Understood." Mercer leaned forward. "I need to be clear about something. What happened last night changes the dynamic of this course. 48 Marines watched you dismantle 8 of their peers in under a minute. Some of them are scared of you now. Others are angry. A few are probably plotting ways to test you again. I expected as much. Can you handle that? Maya met his eyes. Master Sergeant, I've handled worse than angry Marines with bruised egos. Mercer studied her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly, he smiled. I believe you have. He pushed a folder across the desk. This is the Advanced Combatives curriculum for the remaining 4 weeks of the course. I want you to review it and identify areas where your training could enhance what we're already teaching. Maya opened the folder and began scanning the contents. Standard Marine Corps Martial Arts Program Techniques. Ground Fighting. Standing Combat. Weapons Integration. Chokes, locks, throws, strikes. Good material. Solid fundamentals. But there were gaps, things she had learned that weren't covered anywhere in these pages. Techniques designed for operators who might be outnumbered, outweighed, and fighting for their lives in environments where help was not coming. I can add to this, she said. That's what I'm hoping. Mercer stood. First session is at 0800. I want you to observe today. Get a feel for how the candidates respond to instruction. Learn their strengths and weaknesses. And tomorrow you start teaching. Then he paused at the door. One more thing, Staff Sergeant. Maya looked up. What you did last night wasn't just impressive. It was educational. Every Marine in that pit learned something about assumptions and limitations and the danger of underestimating people. He nodded slowly. That's the kind of lesson that saves lives in combat. Don't forget that. He left. Maya sat alone in his office, the folder open in front of her, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The world doesn't care that you're small. The world doesn't care that you're a girl. The only thing that matters is whether you're willing to do what needs to be done when the moment comes. Reyes's voice followed. The skills keep you alive, but you need something that keeps you human. For the first time in 14 months, Maya thought she might have found it. The 0800 session began with 47 candidates assembled in formation outside the training pit. One was missing a corporal who had suffered a bruised larynx during an earlier drill and been sent to medical. The others stood in ranks, their eyes tracking Maya as she took position beside Mercer at the front. Word had spread overnight. Every Marine present now knew the story of what had happened in the pit. 8 fighters. 45 seconds. Complete domination by the woman they had dismissed as a logistics clerk playing soldier. Mercer addressed the formation. You all know what happened last night. Some of you witnessed it. Some of you heard about it from others. I'm not going to rehash the details. He paused. What I'm going to tell you is that Staff Sergeant Chen has been assigned as assistant instructor for the remainder of this course. She will be teaching advanced combatives techniques that are not currently part of the standard curriculum. Murmurs rippled through the formation. I expect every one of you to approach her instruction with the same respect and dedication you would show me. Mercer's voice hardened. Anyone who has a problem with that arrangement can speak to me privately. Anyone who allows personal feelings to interfere with training will be removed from this course, immediately, without appeal. Silence. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Staff Sergeant Chen, do you have anything to add? Maya stepped forward. She felt 47 pairs of eyes fixed on her, some hostile, some curious, some still processing the cognitive dissonance of what they had witnessed. I do. She let her gaze move across the formation. Last night I put 8 Marines on the ground in less than a minute. Some of you are angry about that. Some of you think it was a fluke or a trick or something that could never happen again if conditions were different. She paused. You're wrong. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a trick. It was the application of training that I received in places where techniques meant the difference between completing a mission and coming home in a body bag. The formation had gone completely still. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm not here to prove that I'm better than you. I'm here because the skills I learned can help keep you alive in environments where help isn't coming, and the only thing standing between you and death is your ability to control violence. She let that sink in. Over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to teach you things that aren't in any manual. Things that work against opponents who are bigger, stronger, and fighting without rules. Things that can turn a losing position into a winning one in the space of a heartbeat. But here's what I need from you. I need you to forget what you think you know about who can fight and who can't. I need you to forget the assumptions you've carried your entire careers about size and strength and gender, because those assumptions will get you killed. She met Brighton's eyes across the formation. They almost got 8 of your peers killed last night. Brighton nodded slowly. Any questions? A hand went up near the back of the formation. Sergeant Patterson, the second man Maya had defeated in the pit. Staff Sergeant, the techniques you used last night, the speed, the precision. How long did it take you to develop that level of proficiency? Maya considered the question. 6 years of constant training, 2 years of specialized instruction, and operational deployments where I had to use what I learned against people who were trying to kill me. Patterson absorbed that. Can we learn what you know in 4 weeks? You can learn the foundations, the principles, the mindset. Maya paused. Mastery takes longer. But foundations can save your life just as surely as mastery can. Sometimes all you need is one technique executed at the right moment. Another hand went up. Decker. Staff Sergeant, last night you could have seriously hurt any of us. Me, especially. I gave you plenty of reasons to. He swallowed. Why didn't you? The question hung in the air. Maya thought about how to answer. She thought about Reyes, about her father, about the compound in Mosul, where she had done things that still visited her in dreams. Because control is harder than destruction, she said finally. Anyone can learn to hurt people. The real skill is knowing how much force to apply and when to stop. That's what separates operators from thugs. That's what separates Marines from murderers. She let her gaze sweep across the formation. In combat, you will face moments where you have the power to kill. The training I'm going to give you will make those moments more frequent, more controllable, more survivable. She paused. But with that power comes responsibility. The responsibility to use only what's necessary, to protect life when possible, to never let the capability corrupt the character. Decker nodded slowly. My mentor taught me that, Maya continued. He said the skills keep you alive, but you need something that keeps you human. I'm still learning what that means. But I know this much: the Marines standing beside you in combat deserve someone who can control the violence, not just unleash it. The formation was silent. Mercer stepped forward. Formation dismissed for individual training. Staff Sergeant Chen will be observing today. Tomorrow instruction begins. The candidates dispersed. Maya watched them go, noting who moved with purpose and who lingered with uncertainty. Noting who met her eyes and who avoided them. Noting the dynamics that would shape the next 4 weeks. Brighton approached her after the others had departed. That was a good speech, he said. It wasn't a speech. It was the truth. Same thing sometimes, he paused. They're going to test you. You know that, right? Some of them can't accept what happened last night without confirming it for themselves. I know. How are you going to handle it? Maya thought about the question. She thought about Reyes's voice in her head, about the lessons he had drilled into her regarding patience and control and the dangers of fighting for ego. The same way I handled the last 4 days, she said, by giving them exactly what they need to learn nothing more and nothing less. Brighton studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were going to be a problem, someone I would have to manage. Someone who would make this course harder than it needed to be. And now I think you might be the best thing that ever happened to this program. He extended his hand. Welcome to the instructor team, Staff Sergeant Chen. Maya shook his hand. Call me Maya. The first test came 3 days into Maya's new role. She was demonstrating the knife defense technique when Sergeant Holbrook stepped forward without being called. 6'2", 220 pounds. Infantry veteran with 2 combat deployments, and a reputation for not backing down from anything. Permission to be the attacker, Staff Sergeant. Maya read his body language instantly. The slight tension in his shoulders, the way his weight had shifted forward, the challenge barely concealed behind the respectful words. Granted. She handed him the training knife and stepped back into the center of the circle. 46 Marines watched. Holbrook moved without warning. No telegraphing, no hesitation. A committed thrust toward Maya's midsection with speed that would have caught most people off guard. Maya redirected the blade with her left forearm, trapped his wrist, and torqued his elbow in a direction it was not designed to go. Holbrook's knees buckled. He dropped the knife. His face contorted with pain as she applied pressure just below the threshold of permanent damage. Yield, he gasped. She released him immediately. Holbrook rose slowly, rubbing his elbow. His expression had changed. The challenge was gone, replaced by something rawer. How did you know I was going to attack early? Your breathing changed. Your pupils dilated. Your weight shifted onto the balls of your feet 2 seconds before you moved. Maya picked up the training knife. The body announces its intentions before the mind decides to act. Learn to read those signals, and you'll never be surprised. Holbrook nodded slowly. Can you teach that? I can teach you to see. Whether you learn to read is up to you. She turned to address the entire group. Sergeant Holbrook just demonstrated something important. He attacked with commitment and speed, no hesitation. That's what real threats look like, not the controlled, choreographed attacks you practice in standard drills. She paused. The technique I used works against committed attacks. It fails against hesitant ones because there's not enough momentum to redirect. That's why drilling with partners who hold back actually makes you worse at defending yourself. Brighton spoke from the edge of the circle. Are you saying our standard training methodology is flawed? I'm saying it's incomplete. Standard drills build muscle memory, but muscle memory without pressure testing creates false confidence. You think you can defend against a knife because you've done it 100 times against partners who were trying not to hurt you. She held up the training blade. Real attackers don't care about your safety. They care about putting this through your organs. Train like that's the reality, and you might survive when it happens. The second week brought harder challenges. Maya pushed the candidates beyond their comfort zones. She introduced techniques that required precision under stress. She created scenarios where they faced multiple attackers, limited visibility, compromised positions. She broke down their assumptions about what they could and could not do. Some thrived. Decker turned out to have natural instincts for ground fighting that his previous training had never developed. Patterson discovered a talent for reading opponents that made him nearly impossible to surprise. Even Holbrook, after his initial test, became one of her most dedicated students. Others struggled. Corporal Reeves couldn't adapt to the pressure. Every time Maya increased the intensity, he froze. His techniques fell apart. His confidence crumbled. After the third session, where Reeves ended up on his back within seconds, Maya called him aside. What's happening in your head when the pressure increases? Reeves wouldn't meet her eyes. I don't know, Staff Sergeant. Everything I've learned just disappears. That's your amygdala hijacking your prefrontal cortex. Fear response, overwhelming trained behavior. Maya studied him. Has this happened before, outside of training? Reeves was silent for a long moment, then quietly. Afghanistan, 2 years ago. We got ambushed outside Kandahar. I froze. Just stood there while rounds were snapping past my head. My team leader had to tackle me into cover. Did anyone get hurt because of your freeze? No, but only because Sergeant Morrison was faster than the Taliban. Maya nodded slowly. And you've been carrying that ever since, wondering if you'll freeze again when it matters. Reeves finally met her eyes. Every day, Staff Sergeant. Every single day. Look at me. Maya waited until she had his full attention. Freezing under fire doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. The amygdala response is millions of years old. It kept our ancestors alive. It doesn't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and an insurgent with an AK-47. Then how do I fix it? You don't fix it. You train around it. You build pathways in your brain that bypass the freeze response. You expose yourself to controlled stress until your nervous system learns that pressure doesn't have to mean paralysis. She gestured toward the training pit. That's what we're going to do. You and me. Every evening after regular sessions, we're going to rewire your brain. Reeves stared at her. Why would you spend extra time on someone who might wash out anyway? Because 12 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. Frozen. Afraid. Convinced that one moment of weakness defined everything I was. What changed? Maya thought about her father. About the night he found her crying in her room after the incident in the parking lot. About the words he said that she had never forgotten. Someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Someone invested time they didn't have to invest. Someone showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. She extended her hand. I'm offering you the same thing. Take it or leave it. Reeves took her hand. The extra sessions with Reeves began that evening. Maya started with breathing techniques, then visualization, then controlled exposure to escalating stress levels. She pushed him just past his comfort zone, then pulled back. Pushed again. Pulled back. Building tolerance incrementally. After the first week, Reeves stopped freezing during regular training. After the second week, he submitted Holbrook in a sparring match that left everyone watching in stunned silence. After the third week, he approached Maya outside the barracks with tears in his eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you use what you've learned to save someone's life. I will. Reeves straightened. Staff Sergeant, I need to tell you something. When you first arrived, I was one of the ones who laughed. One of the ones who assumed you didn't belong here. I know. You knew. I noticed everyone who laughed, everyone who whispered, everyone who looked at me like I was a joke. Maya's voice held no anger. It's part of how I was trained, cataloging threats, reading intentions, knowing who might become a problem. Reeves flinched. Was I a threat? No, you were scared. Scared people lash out at easy targets because it makes them feel powerful. You weren't attacking me. You were running from yourself. The words hit Reeves like a physical blow. His eyes glistened. How did you know that? Because I've done the same thing. When I was at my lowest, I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I pushed away anyone who tried to help. I convinced myself that isolation was strength. Maya paused. It took someone much wiser than me to show me how wrong I was. Gunnery Sergeant Reyes. Maya's breath caught. She hadn't mentioned Reyes's name to anyone except Colonel Vance and Mercer. How do you know that name? Brighton told me. He said your mentor was killed in Syria. That's why you came back to conventional forces. Reeves hesitated. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up. Maya was quiet for a moment. The familiar ache in her chest pulsed with each heartbeat. 14 months, and the wound still felt fresh. It's fine, she said finally. Reyes would have wanted me to talk about him. He used to say that the dead only truly die when the living stop speaking their names. He sounds like a wise man. He was the wisest man I ever knew. Maya looked up at the sky. Stars were emerging as darkness deepened. He saved my life in more ways than I can count. Not just physically. He saved me from becoming something I would have hated. What do you mean? The training I received. It changes you. It has to. You can't learn to kill with your bare hands and remain the same person you were before. Reyes understood that. He made sure I developed the skills without losing my humanity. Maya returned her gaze to Reeves. That's what I'm trying to do for you. And for everyone in this course. Give you the capability to survive, but also the wisdom to know when and how to use it. Reeves nodded slowly. I won't let you down, Staff Sergeant. I know you won't. The third week brought an unexpected visitor. Maya was reviewing training schedules in Mercer's office when the door opened without a knock. A man in civilian clothes entered. Late 50s. Gray hair cropped close. The kind of eyes that had seen things most people only read about in classified reports. Mercer stood immediately. Sir. The man waved him back down. Relax, Gunnery Sergeant. This isn't an official visit. His gaze shifted to Maya. Staff Sergeant Chen, I've heard a great deal about you. Maya remained seated, but her body had gone still. She recognized the type. Intelligence community. Probably CIA or DIA. The kind of person who showed up when something sensitive needed handling. I don't believe we've been introduced. We haven't, and we won't be. Not officially. He took the chair beside her without invitation. I'm here because of Gunnery Sergeant Reyes. Maya's heart stopped for a fraction of a second, then resumed at twice its normal rate. What about him? The operation where he was killed. Syria, 14 months ago. The man's voice carried no emotion. The official report says IED. Routine patrol. Bad luck. That's what I was told. That's what everyone was told. He paused. It's not what happened. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. What are you saying? I'm saying that Victor Reyes didn't die in an IED strike. He was assassinated. Specifically targeted by individuals who knew exactly who he was and exactly how to reach him. The room tilted. Maya gripped the arms of her chair to steady herself. That's impossible. His movements were classified. His identity was protected. No one outside the program knew who he was or where he was operating. Someone did. The man's eyes held hers. Someone with access to information that should have been impossible to obtain. Someone inside. Inside what? Inside the program. Inside the network. Inside something that was supposed to be impenetrable. He leaned forward. Staff Sergeant Victor Reyes was investigating a security breach when he was killed. He believed someone in the intelligence community was selling information to hostile actors, information that was getting operators killed. Maya's hands had started to shake. She pressed them flat against her thighs to hide the tremor. Why are you telling me this? Because Reyes trusted you more than anyone else in the program. He told me once that if anything happened to him, you were the only person he would trust to finish what he started. I'm not in the program anymore. I requested transfer to conventional forces. I know, and I understand why. The man's voice softened slightly. What happened to you in Mosul? The aftermath? The silence? Reyes told me you were struggling, that the weight of the work was crushing you. So you know everything about me. I know enough. Enough to understand why you walked away. Enough to respect that decision. He paused. But I also know that whoever killed Reyes is still operating, still selling information, still getting people killed. Maya closed her eyes. She saw Reyes's face, his weathered features, his quiet smile, the way he looked at her like she was something worth protecting. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. Not yet." The man stood. "I came to give you information, not to recruit you. What you do with that information is your choice." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small envelope, placed it on the desk. "Insight or contact protocols, secure channels, ways to reach me if you ever decide you want to know more." He moved toward the door. "If you decide to burn that envelope and forget this conversation ever happened, I'll understand. You've earned the right to walk away. And if I don't walk away..." The man turned. For the first time, something like emotion flickered across his face. Then Victor Reyes might finally get the justice he deserves. He left without another word. Maya stared at the envelope on the desk. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was still racing. Everything she thought she knew about Reyes's death had just been shattered. Mercer spoke quietly. "I had no idea anyone was coming. That meeting wasn't scheduled. It wasn't meant to be." Maya reached for the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. People like him don't schedule meetings. They appear when they need to and disappear when they're done. "What are you going to do?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She thought about the past 14 months. The grief, the anger, the slow process of rebuilding herself from the wreckage of losing the only person who truly understood her. She had come to this course to disappear, to formalize skills she could acknowledge, to build a new life in the conventional forces far from the shadows where Reyes had found her. But Reyes hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered by someone inside. Someone who was still operating, still killing. "I don't know yet," she said finally. "But I'm not going to burn it." She slipped the envelope into her pocket. Training continued, but Maya's focus had shifted. During the day, she taught techniques and drilled candidates and pushed them toward excellence. She maintained the role she had built over the past 3 weeks. The instructor, the mentor, the warrior who had found a new purpose. At night, she lay awake thinking about Reyes, thinking about the compound in Mosul, the 4 men she had killed, the silence afterward. The way Reyes had looked at her when she returned from that mission, not with pride, not with satisfaction, but with something that might have been concern. "You did what needed to be done," he had told her. "But don't let what you did become who you are." She had tried to follow that advice, tried to separate the operator from the woman, tried to maintain the boundaries that kept her human. Now she wondered if those boundaries had been an illusion all along. The envelope sat in her wall locker unopened since the meeting. Every night she considered reading its contents. Every night she put it off. Not yet, she told herself. Finish the course first, then decide. But the decision was already made. She had known it the moment the gray-haired man spoke Reyes's name, known it the moment he said assassination instead of accident. Victor Reyes had given her everything. Training, purpose, a reason to believe she could be more than a weapon. Someone had taken him from her, and Maya Chen was not the kind of person who let debts go unpaid. The final week of the course arrived faster than Maya expected. 26 candidates remained from the original 48. 12 had washed out. 8 had requested transfer after deciding the course was more than they were prepared for. 2 had been removed for disciplinary issues. The remaining 26 were harder, sharper, more capable than they had been 4 weeks ago. Maya could see it in the way they moved, the way they fought. the way they approached problems that would have paralyzed them during week 1. Decker had become one of the top performers. His natural aggression had been channeled into controlled precision. He moved through sparring matches like water around stones, finding gaps that others missed, exploiting weaknesses that others overlooked. Reeves had transformed completely. The man who had frozen under pressure now actively sought it out. His confidence had rebuilt itself from foundations that no longer included fear. Patterson had developed into the best reader in the course. He could predict an opponent's attack before it launched with accuracy that bordered on precognition. Even Holbrook the Giant, who had tested Maya on her 3rd day, had refined his raw power into something more sophisticated. He was still a bulldozer, but now he was a bulldozer with steering. Brighton pulled Maya aside after the morning session. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "These candidates are performing at levels I haven't seen in the 8 years I've been associated with this course. They did the work. I just showed them what was possible." "Don't minimize what you've accomplished." Brighton's voice was earnest. "Mercer told me this morning that he's recommending you for a permanent instructor position. Not assistant instructor, lead instructor for the Advanced Combatives program." Maya absorbed that. "What did you say?" "I said he should have offered it 2 weeks ago." Brighton paused. "You belong here, Maya. These Marines need what you can teach them. The Corps needs it." "And what about what I need?" The question surprised Brighton. "What do you mean?" Maya thought about the envelope in her wall locker, about the gray-haired man's words, about Reyes lying in the Syrian desert betrayed by someone he trusted. "I came here to disappear," she said quietly, "to build a life where no one knew what I was or what I had done. A life where the past couldn't touch me. And now I'm not sure that's possible. Not sure it's even what I want anymore." Brighton studied her face. "Something's changed. In the past few days, something's shifted in you. I can see it. You're getting better at reading people. I learned from a good teacher." He didn't smile. "Whatever's happening, whatever decision you're facing, I hope you know you don't have to face it alone. You've built something here. A team. People who would stand with you if you asked." Maya looked at him. Really looked. 4 weeks ago, this man had tried to drive her out, had assumed she was a diversity checkbox, had represented everything wrong with the assumptions that governed military culture. Now he was offering loyalty. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." The final evaluation exercise took place on Saturday morning. 26 candidates faced a gauntlet designed to test everything they had learned. Multiple opponents, limited visibility, weapons integration, stress inoculation, scenario after scenario, each more demanding than the last. Maya watched from the observation platform as her students performed. Decker moved through his scenarios with fluid efficiency. Reeves faced his pressure test without a single freeze. Patterson anticipated attacks before they materialized. Holbrook combined power with precision in ways that would have been impossible 4 weeks ago. When the final candidate finished, Mercer turned to Maya. "What do you think? I think they're ready." "Ready for what?" Maya considered the question. "Ready to teach what they've learned, ready to face what's coming, ready to be the Marines they were always capable of becoming." Mercer nodded slowly. 26 graduates, highest completion rate in the history of this course, highest average performance scores, highest instructor evaluations. He extended his hand. "That's your doing, Staff Sergeant Chen. Whatever happens next, what you built here will spread through the Corps for years to come." Maya shook his hand. "Thank you, Master Sergeant, for giving me the chance. Thank you for proving me wrong." Mercer's grip tightened briefly. "I judged you based on what I saw instead of what you were. That's a mistake I won't make again." That night, Maya sat alone in her barracks room. The envelope lay open on her desk. Inside were contact protocols, secure communication channels, intelligence summaries that painted a picture of a conspiracy extending deeper than she had imagined. Someone inside the program had betrayed Reyes, betrayed the operators who trusted the system to protect them, sold information that led directly to American deaths, and that someone was still operating. Maya picked up the photograph of Reyes, studied his face, remembered his voice. The moment you fight for ego or revenge or anything except the mission, you become dangerous. Was this revenge? Was hunting Reyes's killer the ego-driven response he had warned her against? Or was it something else? Justice, maybe. Accountability. The mission he would have wanted her to complete. Maya set down the photograph and picked up her phone. She dialed the number from the envelope. It rang once. "I was wondering when you'd call." The gray-haired man's voice came through clear despite the encryption. "I'm in," Maya said. "Tell me everything." The gray-haired man's name was Harrison. That was all he offered. First name, last name, or operational alias, Maya never learned which. They met at a diner off base 2 days after her phone call. Neutral ground. Public enough to discourage anything overt. Private enough for conversation that could never be recorded. Harrison slid a tablet across the table. "Everything I know is on there. Encrypted. The password is the date of your first operational deployment, formatted as numbers only." Maya entered the code. Files populated the screen. Intelligence reports, communication intercepts, financial transactions, a web of connections that made her stomach turn. How deep does this go? Deep enough that I don't trust anyone in my own agency. Harrison's voice was flat. Whoever sold out Reyes had access to compartmented information, information that only a handful of people could reach. How many? 17. That's the maximum number who could have known Reyes's location and identity during that Syria operation. Maya scrolled through the files, names she didn't recognize, positions she barely understood, a network of power and influence that extended across multiple agencies and military branches. You've been investigating this for 14 months. What have you found? 11 of the 17 have been cleared. Solid alibis, no financial irregularities, no suspicious communications. Harrison paused. That leaves 6. Who are they? That's where it gets complicated. He leaned forward. 3 are still active in sensitive positions. 2 have retired but maintain clearances. 1 is dead natural causes, supposedly, but the timing was convenient. You think the traitor eliminated a potential witness? I think nothing about this situation is coincidental. Harrison's eyes held hers. Staff Sergeant, I need to be clear about something. This investigation is not sanctioned. I'm running it off the books because I don't know who I can trust inside the official channels. Then why trust me? Because Reyes trusted you. And because you have something I don't. He tapped the tablet. Access. 3 of the remaining suspects have connections to military training programs. Programs you now have legitimate reason to interact with. Maya understood immediately. You want me to get close to them. Gather intelligence. Find proof. I want you to help me identify the traitor. What happens after that depends on what we find. She studied Harrison's face, looking for deception, looking for angles he wasn't revealing. What's your stake in this? Why are you running an unauthorized investigation into an assassination that officially never happened? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge of something that might have been grief. Victor Reyes was my friend. We served together 30 years ago, before either of us went into the work that would define our careers. I owe him a debt that I can never repay. He paused. Finding his killer is as close as I can get. Maya recognized the emotion behind his words. It mirrored her own. Tell me about the 3 with military connections. Harrison pulled up 3 files on the tablet. Colonel Marcus Webb, currently assigned to Special Operations Command. He oversees budget allocation for classified programs, including the one Reyes belonged to. Maya memorized the face. Next, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Price, Defense Intelligence Agency, liaison to Joint Special Operations. She coordinated intelligence support for the Syria mission where Reyes was killed. Another face committed to memory. And the third, Harrison hesitated. This one's going to be difficult for you to hear. Try me. He pulled up the final file. Maya's blood went cold. The face staring back at her was someone she knew. Someone she had worked with during her time in the program. Someone she had trusted. Major David Chen, her cousin. That's impossible, she whispered. I wish it were. Harrison's voice was gentle. Major Chen had access to every piece of information that was compromised. His security clearances overlap perfectly with the intelligence that led to Reyes's death. David recruited me into the program. He vouched for me. He's family. Which is why I saved him for last. Harrison paused. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm saying he's on the list of people who could be, and I need you to help me determine which column he belongs in. Maya stared at her cousin's photograph. David, 5 years older, had been the one who told her about the cultural support program, had written the recommendation that opened doors she never knew existed, had celebrated when she completed her training, had stood beside her at Reyes's memorial service, his face wet with tears. If David is the traitor, she said slowly, then he stood at Reyes's funeral and mourned a man he helped murder. Yes. And if he's innocent, then investigating him could destroy a relationship that's one of the only family connections I have left. Also, yes. Harrison's voice held no judgment. I told you this would be difficult. Maya closed the tablet. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. What do you need me to do? Harrison outlined the plan over the next 2 hours. Maya would maintain her position at Camp Lejeune. Continue building her reputation as an instructor. Use that reputation to gain access to training conferences and interagency meetings where the suspects would be present. She would observe, listen, gather intelligence through the skills Reyes had taught her, the ability to read people, to detect deception, to notice patterns that others missed. She would report to Harrison through secure channels, build a picture of each suspect's behavior connections and vulnerabilities. And when they identified the traitor, they would act. What does act mean exactly? Maya asked. It means we expose them. Bring the evidence to people who can do something about it. People I trust even if there aren't many left. And if exposure isn't possible, if the traitor is too protected. Harrison's expression hardened. Then we find another way. But Maya understood what he wasn't saying. In the world they both inhabited, another way had a very specific meaning. I need to think about this. Take the time you need. Harrison stood. But understand that every day we wait is another day the traitor operates, another potential compromise, another life at risk. He left money on the table and walked out without looking back. Maya sat alone with the tablet staring at her cousin's face, wondering how everything had become so complicated. The next 3 weeks were a study in compartmentalization. During the day, Maya taught. A new cycle of candidates had arrived, 42 Marines eager to learn what the previous class had learned. She threw herself into instruction with the same intensity she had brought to her first cycle. At night, she studied the files Harrison had provided, memorized details about Webb, Price, and David, traced their career paths, mapped their connections, built psychological profiles based on available information. Colonel Webb appeared to be a bureaucrat. 30 years in the military, most of it behind desks. His fitness reports praised his administrative skills, but noted a lack of operational experience. He had never been in combat, never faced the kind of pressure that revealed true character. Lieutenant Colonel Price was more complex. DIA analyst turned liaison officer. She had spent years in the intelligence community building relationships across agencies. Her file mentioned a divorce 3 years ago, financial difficulties, a lifestyle that seemed to exceed her government salary. Red flags, Harrison had noted, but not proof. And then there was David. Maya's cousin had a spotless record, exemplary service, multiple commendations, a reputation for integrity that followed him through every assignment. But he also had opportunity, access, knowledge that could have been sold to the highest bidder. Maya hated herself for suspecting him, hated Harrison for putting the possibility in her head, hated the entire situation for forcing her to choose between loyalty and justice. She called David on a Tuesday evening. "Maya." His voice was warm, surprised. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you. How's the instructor gig?" "It's good, challenging, exactly what I needed." "I'm glad. After everything you went through, you deserve something stable." He paused. "Are you okay? You sound different." Maya's heart clenched. How well did David know her well enough to detect the suspicion in her voice? "I'm fine, just tired. The new candidates are demanding." "I can imagine." David laughed. "Remember when you were a candidate? You were so determined to prove yourself that you nearly broke your hand on a training dummy." "I remember. You've come a long way since then." His tone softened. "Reyes would be proud of you. He always said you had the potential to surpass everyone he'd ever trained." The mention of Reyes sent a spike of pain through Maya's chest. If David was the traitor, he was either a masterful actor or genuinely compartmentalized enough to speak of his victim with apparent affection. "I miss him," Maya said. "Every day." "So do I." David's voice cracked slightly. "His death changed everything for the program, changed everything for all of us who knew him." Maya closed her eyes. Was this grief genuine or performance? "David, I need to ask you something." "Anything." "The Syria operation, where Reyes was killed, did you have access to his mission details?" Silence on the line, long enough to make Maya's pulse quicken. "Why are you asking me that? I've been thinking about what happened, trying to understand how it went wrong. Reyes was too good to be caught by a random IED. Someone had to know where he was going." More silence. Then David spoke, his voice careful. "Maya, you need to stop this line of thinking." "Why?" "Because it leads to places you don't want to go. Questions you don't want to ask. Answers that could get you killed." Maya's hand tightened on the phone. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that some things are buried for a reason, and digging them up can have consequences that go beyond what you're prepared to face." "David, do you know something about Reyes's death?" Another pause. When David spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder, more guarded. "I know enough to understand that this conversation needs to end, and I know enough to tell you as your cousin and as someone who cares about you to drop this. Walk away. Live your life." "I can't do that." "Maya, he was my mentor, my teacher, the closest thing I had to a father after Dad died. I can't just forget what happened to him." David's breath came through the phone in a long exhale. "You were always stubborn, even as a kid. Once you got something in your head, nothing could shake it loose." "Is that why you recruited me? Because you knew I wouldn't quit?" "I recruited you because Reyes asked me to. He saw something in you that he hadn't seen in anyone else, something that scared him and amazed him in equal measure." "What do you mean, scared him?" "He told me once that you had the potential to be the most effective operator the program had ever produced. But he was afraid of what that might cost you." David paused. "I think he was right to be afraid." Maya's throat tightened. David, if you know something about who killed him, you need to tell me. What I know is classified beyond anything you're cleared for. What I suspect is even more dangerous. His voice dropped. Maya, please, I'm begging you. Let this go. For your own sake. I can't. Then I can't help you. David's tone had gone flat, professional. This conversation never happened. Do you understand, David? The line went dead. Maya stared at the phone in her hand, her mind racing. David knew something. That was clear. But whether he knew because he was involved, or because he had stumbled onto the same trail Harrison was following, that remained uncertain. She needed more information, more access, more time. She needed to get closer to all three suspects. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 weeks after her call with David, Maya received orders to attend a joint training conference at Fort Bragg. Special operations instructors from across the military branches gathering to share techniques and coordinate curricula. Colonel Webb would be there. Lieutenant Colonel Price would be presenting. And Major David Chen had been added to the attendee list 3 days before the conference began. Harrison's voice came through the secure line that night. This is your chance. All three in one location. I'll have support assets in position if you need extraction. I won't need extraction. I'm just observing. Things can change quickly. Be prepared for anything. Maya packed her bag with the steady hands of someone who had prepared for danger countless times before. But beneath the calm exterior, her pulse raced with anticipation. This was not an instructor course. This was not a training exercise. This was the hunt for her mentor's killer. And she was finally closing in. Fort Bragg welcomed her with humidity that pressed down like a weight, and security protocols that made Camp Lejeune look relaxed. Maya checked into her assigned quarters and spent the first evening mapping the conference facilities. Exit routes, surveillance blind spots, positions where conversations could be overheard without detection, old habits ingrained through years of operational training. The conference began the next morning with opening remarks from Colonel Webb. Maya watched him from the back of the auditorium. He was shorter than his file photos suggested, softer around the middle, the kind of man who had aged into comfort rather than capability. His speech was generic. Budget priorities, training effectiveness, inter-service cooperation, the words of a bureaucrat who had never held a weapon in anger. But his eyes told a different story. When Webb scanned the audience, his gaze lingered on certain faces, cataloging, assessing, the behavior of someone who was always aware of who was watching him. Maya filed that observation away. Lieutenant Colonel Price presented after the lunch break, intelligence integration with special operations training, methods for incorporating real-time data into scenario development. Price was sharp, articulate, the kind of officer who commanded attention through competence rather than rank. Her presentation revealed deep knowledge of operational realities that went beyond her analyst background. But she was also nervous. Small tells that most people would miss. A slight tremor in her hands. Excess blinking. The voice pitched slightly higher than normal. Why was she nervous? Presenting to peers shouldn't trigger that level of stress in someone with her experience. Maya added that observation to her mental file. David arrived on the second day. Maya spotted him during a networking session. He was talking with a group of MARSOC officers, his easy smile and confident posture drawing people toward him like gravity. When his eyes found hers across the room, something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Warning. Fear. He excused himself from the group and made his way toward her. Maya, I didn't expect to see you here. The conference invitation came through official channels. Hard to decline. Of course, David's smile didn't reach his eyes. How are you enjoying Fort Bragg? It's informative. Lots of valuable perspectives on training methodology. That's good. That's what these conferences are for. He glanced around, checking who might be in earshot. Can we talk privately? Now. Now would be best. Maya nodded. Lead the way. David guided her through the conference facility to an empty briefing room. He checked the hallway before closing the door. What are you doing here? Attending a training conference, like I said. Don't play games with me. David's voice was harsh. I know why you're really here. I know who you've been talking to. Maya's body tensed. What do you mean? Harrison, the gray-haired man, the one who's been running an off-the-books investigation into Reyes's death. How do you know about that? Because I've been running the same investigation. David's face was tight. Maya, you've walked into something bigger than you understand, bigger than Harrison understands. Then explain it to me. David ran his hand through his hair. For the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely afraid. The person who killed Reyes isn't one of the 3 suspects on Harrison's list. It's not Webb. It's not Price. It's not me. Then who? Harrison. David's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Harrison is the traitor. He's been using the investigation to identify anyone who might expose him, anyone who might figure out what he's done. Maya's blood went cold. That's impossible. Harrison came to me. He recruited me to help find the killer. Because you're the only person alive who knew Reyes well enough to potentially uncover the truth. By bringing you into his investigation, he controls what you learn. He directs your focus toward suspects who are innocent. And when the time is right, he eliminates you before you can figure out what's really happening. You expect me to believe that the man investigating Reyes's murder is the one who caused it. I expect you to consider the possibility. David grabbed her shoulders. Maya, I've been building this case for 14 months. I have evidence, communications, financial records, proof that Harrison sold intelligence to hostile actors for years before Reyes started getting close to the truth. Then why haven't you exposed him? Because he's protected, connected. He has allies in places I can't reach. David's grip tightened. And because I was afraid that if I moved too soon he would disappear before I could prove anything. Maya's mind was spinning. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling. If what you're saying is true, then Harrison sent me here knowing you would be here, knowing we would talk. David's face went pale. He's using you to flush me out, to confirm that I'm onto him. Which means he's watching. Right now, probably has assets in position. Maya's training kicked in. Threat assessment, escape routes, defensive options. We need to move, now. There's a service exit through the maintenance corridor. Follow me. They had taken 3 steps toward the door when it burst open. 2 men in civilian clothes, weapons drawn. The cold efficiency of professionals who had done this many times before. Major Chen, Staff Sergeant Chen. The lead man's voice was calm. Please come with us. Harrison would like to have a conversation. Maya's hands curled into fists. The hunt had just become a trap, and she was standing in the middle of it. Maya moved before conscious thought caught up with instinct. She swept the lead man's weapon arm upward, driving her palm into his elbow joint with force that hyperextended it beyond design limits. His pistol discharged into the ceiling as his fingers went numb. She caught the weapon before it hit the ground, pivoted, and put 2 rounds into the second man's thigh before he could acquire a target. Both men were down in under 3 seconds. David stared at her with something between awe and horror. You just move! Now! She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. The shots would bring security. They had maybe 90 seconds before the building locked down. "There's a vehicle in the east parking lot," David said as they ran. "Gray sedan. Keys are in the wheel well." "You planned an extraction route." "I plan extraction routes everywhere I go. Old habit." They burst through the service exit into blinding afternoon sunlight. Maya scanned for threats. Clear left, clear right. Movement near the main entrance, security responding to the gunshots. The gray sedan was exactly where David said it would be. Maya found the keys slid behind the wheel and had the engine running before David finished closing his door. She pulled out of the parking lot at normal speed. Nothing to draw attention. Just two people leaving a conference during a break. "Where are we going?" David asked. "Somewhere Harrison can't reach us. Somewhere we can figure out what the hell is actually happening." "I know a place. Safe house I established 18 months ago. Off the books. No paper trail." "How far?" 2 hours. Maybe less if you drive like you fight." Maya pressed the accelerator. The safe house was a cabin in the Virginia mountains. Remote, defensible. The kind of location that intelligence professionals created for situations exactly like this one. David swept for surveillance devices while Maya secured the perimeter. Nothing electronic. Nothing physical. They were clean. "Start talking," Maya said when they were settled. "Everything. From the beginning." David poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to her. His hands were still shaking. "It started 14 months ago, right after Reyes died." He took a long drink. "I received an anonymous message, encrypted, untraceable. It contained intelligence about the Syria operation that should have been impossible for anyone outside the mission to possess. What kind of intelligence? Reyes's exact location at the time of the attack, the route he was traveling, the composition of his security detail." David's voice tightened. Information that proved the IED wasn't random. It was targeted, specifically designed to kill him. "Who sent the message?" "I don't know. I've spent 14 months trying to trace it." He paused. "But the content made one thing clear. Whoever sent it wanted me to investigate. Wanted me to find the truth." "Why you?" "Because I had access. Because I was family to someone Reyes had mentored. Because I was positioned to look into things without raising immediate suspicion." David met her eyes. "And because whoever sent that message knew I would care, knew I wouldn't let it go." Maya processed that. "So you started investigating?" "Quietly, carefully, using every resource I had without tipping off whoever was responsible." David set down his glass. "It took 6 months before I found the first real lead." "What was it? Financial records, buried deep, hidden behind shell companies and offshore accounts." His jaw tightened. "Payments totaling over $2 million, made to an account that was eventually traced back to someone inside the intelligence community. Harrison. David nodded. "The payment started 8 years ago. Roughly the same time he began receiving sensitive intelligence about special operations activities that were subsequently compromised." "How many operations?" 17 confirmed, probably more we haven't identified yet. David's voice dropped. "Reyes wasn't the first person Harrison sold out. He was just the first one who started figuring out what was happening." Maya felt sick. 17 operations. How many people had died because Harrison had traded their lives for money? If you had this evidence, why didn't you expose him? Because evidence isn't enough, not against someone like Harrison. David stood and began pacing. He has allies, protection, people in positions of power who benefit from keeping his secrets buried. "So you waited." "I waited. Built my case, documented everything, created redundancies in case something happened to me." He stopped pacing and faced her. "And then Harrison approached you. He told me Reyes was assassinated, told me he was investigating, asked me to help identify the killer." He was testing you, seeing how much you knew, how much of a threat you might become. David's expression hardened. And when he realized you were getting close to the truth, he would have eliminated you, made it look like an accident, just like he tried to do with Reyes. Maya's mind raced through everything Harrison had told her. The suspects, the investigation, the secure channels and contact protocols, all of it designed to control her, direct her, keep her focused on innocent people while the real killer operated in plain sight. The two men at the conference, Harrison's people, private contractors, deniable assets, the kind of people who do dirty work and disappear when it's done. I shot one of them, which means Harrison knows his cover is blown, knows you're not under his control anymore. David's voice was grim. He'll come after us. Both of us. With everything he has. Maya stood, walked to the window, stared out at the darkening forest. Then we stop waiting, she said. We expose him. Now, before he can regroup. How I told you evidence isn't enough. Then we get something better than evidence. Maya turned to face her cousin. We get a confession. The plan came together over the next 6 hours. Maya would contact Harrison, claim she had escaped David's manipulation, claim she had realized David was the real traitor and wanted to bring him in. Harrison would believe it because he wanted to believe it, because Maya had been his asset, his tool, his carefully cultivated weapon aimed at eliminating threats. And when Harrison came to collect his victory, Maya would be ready. This is suicide, David said when she finished explaining. You're putting yourself directly in front of a man who kills people for money. I'm putting myself in front of the man who killed Reyes. There's a difference. The difference being I've been waiting 14 months for this moment. Maya's voice was cold. And I'm not going to let it pass. David studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. What do you need from me? Technical support, surveillance equipment, recording devices that can capture everything Harrison says without him detecting them. She paused. And a backup plan in case everything goes wrong. What kind of backup plan? The kind where you take the evidence we've gathered and burn Harrison's network to the ground, even if I don't make it out. David was silent for a long moment. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Maya Reyes wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself for revenge. This isn't revenge. Maya met his eyes. This is justice, and if the price of justice is my life, then I've already accepted that cost. David exhaled slowly. Then he nodded. Let's do it. Maya made the call at midnight. Harrison answered on the second ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. We need to talk. Yes, we do. My associates tell me you responded to their invitation rather aggressively. Your associates tried to take me by force. I defended myself. Fair enough. Harrison's voice carried a note of amusement. So, where do we stand? David tried to convince me you're the traitor. Said you killed Reyes. Said you've been running me as an asset to eliminate threats to your operation. And what do you believe? Maya let the silence stretch. Then, I believe David is desperate. I believe he's the one who sold out Reyes, and now he's trying to deflect suspicion onto you. That's an interesting conclusion. It's the only conclusion that makes sense. You came to me with evidence. With a real investigation, David came to me with accusations and paranoia. Where is he now? I left him at the safe house. He thinks I'm getting supplies. Maya paused. I can give you his location, but I want something in return. Name it. I want to be there when you take him down. I want to look him in the eyes and know that the man who killed Reyes is going to pay for what he did. Harrison was quiet for several seconds. Then, that can be arranged. Where should we meet? Maya gave him coordinates for an abandoned industrial facility 20 miles from the safe house, somewhere isolated, somewhere private, somewhere with excellent acoustics for recording equipment. 2 hours, Harrison said. Come alone. I will. The line went dead. Maya turned to David. He's coming. You know this is a trap, for you. I know. Maya checked her weapon. That's why you're going to be in position before he arrives. That's why every word he says is going to be recorded. And that's why when this is over, his entire network is going to collapse. And if he doesn't confess, he will. Maya's voice carried absolute certainty. Men like Harrison can't resist explaining themselves, can't resist proving how smart they are. It's their greatest weakness. She moved toward the door. Maya. David's voice stopped her. Be careful. Please. I'm always careful. No, you're not. You're reckless and determined and willing to die for what you believe in. He paused. That's what makes you dangerous, but it's also what makes you vulnerable. Maya looked back at her cousin. The man she had suspected. The man she had nearly condemned based on Harrison's manipulation. I'm sorry, she said, for doubting you. Don't be. You were working with incomplete information, making the best decisions you could. David managed a small smile. That's all any of us can do. Maya nodded. Then she walked out into the night. Harrison arrived at the industrial facility 45 minutes early. Maya watched from the shadows as 3 vehicles pulled into the loading area. 6 men emerged. Professional security. Armed and alert. They swept the building systematically, checking for threats and surveillance. They found nothing. David's equipment was too sophisticated, too well hidden. The recording devices were military-grade, designed to evade exactly this kind of detection. When the sweep was complete, Harrison stepped out of the lead vehicle. He looked different than he had at the diner. Harder. More dangerous. The grandfatherly concern had been replaced by something colder. Maya emerged from her hiding position. Staff Sergeant Chen. Harrison's voice echoed in the empty space. Thank you for reaching out. I was beginning to think I had misjudged you. You did misjudge me. You thought I was someone who could be manipulated. I thought you were someone who wanted justice for Victor Reyes. I am. Maya stopped 15 feet from him. Which is why I'm here. Harrison studied her face. You said you could give me David's location. I can. But first I want answers. About what? About Reyes. About what really happened in Syria. About why a man who dedicated his life to protecting this country had to die in a desert on the other side of the world. Harrison was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. You want to understand. I can respect that. He gestured to his security team. Give us some privacy. The 6 men withdrew to the perimeter out of earshot, but still visible. Victor Reyes was a remarkable operator, Harrison began. Perhaps the best I ever worked with, but he had a fatal flaw. What flaw? Loyalty. He was loyal to people, to principles, to an idea of what this country should be. Harrison's voice hardened. He couldn't accept that sometimes the mission requires compromises, that sometimes protecting the country means doing things the country would never approve of. Things like selling intelligence to hostile actors. Harrison's eyes narrowed. So David did get to you. David showed me evidence, financial records, 17 compromised operations. Maya's voice was steady. Is it true? Did you sell out your own people for money? Harrison laughed. It was a cold sound entirely without humor. Money. You think this is about money? He shook his head. The money was just a mechanism. A way to fund operations that official channels would never approve. A way to accomplish objectives that bureaucrats and politicians were too weak to pursue. What objectives? Stability, control. The preservation of American interests in a world that grows more dangerous every day. Harrison's voice carried genuine conviction. The people I worked with, the people who paid me, they understand what's really at stake. They understand that sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to win the game. Pieces? You mean people? I mean assets, resources, tools to be deployed and discarded as the situation requires. Harrison's expression was utterly calm. Victor Reyes was one such tool. He served his purpose, and when he became a liability, he was removed. Maya felt rage building in her chest, white-hot and all-consuming. He was your friend. He was my colleague. There's a difference. Harrison stepped closer. Maya, you have skills that would be valuable to the organization I represent, skills that are wasted in conventional service. I'm offering you a choice. Join us. Use your abilities for something larger than yourself, or die here in this building another casualty of a war you don't even understand. I understand enough. Maya's voice was ice. I understand that you betrayed your country, betrayed the people who trusted you, betrayed a man who thought you were his friend. Victor was naive. So are you. Harrison reached into his jacket. Maya moved. She covered the distance between them in a heartbeat, catching his wrist before the pistol cleared leather. A twist, a crack. The weapon clattered to the concrete floor. Harrison screamed as his broken wrist dangled at an impossible angle. His security team reacted instantly. 6 weapons came up. 6 laser dots painted Maya's chest. Don't move, the lead guard commanded. Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. The doors of the building burst open. David led a tactical team of 12 operators' contacts he had cultivated over 14 months of careful planning. They moved with precision, overwhelming Harrison's security before anyone could fire a shot. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Harrison knelt on the concrete floor, his broken wrist cradled against his chest, surrounded by his captured security detail. David approached holding a tablet that displayed audio waveforms. Every word, he said. Crystal clear. Confession to 17 compromised operations. Confession to ordering the assassination of Victor Reyes. Confession to running an intelligence network that traded American lives for money. Harrison's face had gone gray. You don't understand what you've done. The people I work for will be identified and prosecuted. David interrupted. Your financial records are already being analyzed. Your communications are being decrypted. Every asset you ever controlled is being rolled up as we speak. You'll never get them all. We'll get enough. David looked at Maya. It's over. Maya stared down at the man who had killed her mentor. The man who had tried to use her as a weapon against her own family. The man who had traded lives for power and called it patriotism. She wanted to kill him. The urge was almost overwhelming. Her hands remembered the compound in Mosul, remembered what they were capable of, remembered how easy it would be to end this permanently. But Reyes's voice echoed in her memory. The skills keep you alive, but you need something that keeps you human. She had found that something. Teaching. Mentoring. Building rather than destroying. She would not let Harrison take that from her. Get him out of here, she said quietly. Let the system deal with him. David nodded to his team. They hauled Harrison to his feet and led him toward the waiting vehicles. At the door, Harrison turned back. His face was twisted with rage and pain. This isn't over. You have no idea what forces you've set in motion. No idea what? You're wrong. Maya's voice was calm, final. It's over for you. And that's all that matters. The door closed behind him. Maya stood alone in the empty building, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of 14 months finally lifting from her shoulders. It was done. 3 months later, Maya returned to Camp Lejeune. The investigation into Harrison's network had expanded beyond anyone's initial projections. 12 arrests, 5 intelligence agencies compromised, a web of corruption that stretched across 3 continents. Harrison himself was in federal custody awaiting trial for espionage and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He would spend the rest of his life in a supermax prison, isolated from the world he had betrayed. David had been promoted. His role in exposing the network had earned him recognition at the highest levels. He now led a counterintelligence task force dedicated to preventing future infiltrations. Colonel Vance met Maya at the gate. "Staff Sergeant Chen, welcome back." "Thank you, ma'am. I've been following the news." Vance's expression was unreadable. "You've been busy." "I had some unfinished business to attend to." "So I gathered." The colonel paused. "Master Sergeant Mercer has been holding your position, the Advanced Combatives Program. He refused to let anyone else take it. That was kind of him." "It wasn't kindness. It was recognition." Vance met her eyes. "You belong here, Staff Sergeant. These Marines need what you can teach them. The Corps needs it." Maya thought about everything she had been through. The pit fight at the beginning. The investigation. Harrison's betrayal. The confrontation that nearly cost her everything. She thought about Reyes. About his lessons. About the purpose he had helped her find. "I'm not going anywhere, ma'am." Vance nodded. "Good. Your new cycle of candidates arrives tomorrow. 44 Marines who have no idea what they're getting into." Maya smiled. "They'll figure it out." That evening she stood at the edge of the training pit as the sun set over Camp Lejeune. The sand was still. Waiting. Ready for the blood and sweat and transformation that would come tomorrow. She pulled out the photograph of Reyes. Studied his face one last time. Let herself feel the grief and gratitude and love that his memory evoked. "I did it," she whispered. "I found him. I stopped him. I made it right." The wind stirred the sand, and for a moment Maya could almost hear Reyes's voice in the rustle of the breeze. "The skills keep you alive, but you need something that keeps you human." She had found that something. Not in revenge, not in violence, not in the shadows where she had spent so many years. She had found it in teaching, in mentoring, in passing on what she knew to Marines who would carry it forward long after she was gone. She put the photograph away. Tomorrow, 44 candidates would arrive. 44 Marines who would look at her and see a small woman with a green belt and a logistics background. 44 people who would underestimate her doubt, her challenge her, and 44 people who would learn, as so many before them had learned, that assumptions could be fatal, and strength came in forms that had nothing to do with size. Maya Chen had been a weapon. Then she had been a hunter. Now she was something more. She was a teacher, a mentor, a warrior who had found peace, not in victory over enemies, but in the creation of allies. And that she understood finally was exactly what Victor Reyes had wanted for her all along. The silence was over. The purpose was clear, and the woman who had dropped 8 Marines in 45 seconds was exactly where she belonged.